The Discovery Commander Krex floated in the zero-gravity chamber of the Galactic Archive Station, her crystalline body refracting the soft blue light that emanated from the ancient data cores surrounding her. For 3 standard cycles, she had been studying the predecessor archives, those mysterious records left behind by the civilization that had seeded intelligent life throughout the galaxy millions of years ago. Every species they had encountered or created had been meticulously catalogued, each with precise classifications that described their nature and potential. The Vorthon were labeled Builders Harmonious. The Zilaki received Warriors Honorable. Even her own people, the Crystallids, were marked as Scholars Preservers. Each classification came with extensive subcategories, detailed notes and predictive models. But then there were the humans. 2 words, nothing more. Final protocol. She extended a tendril of energy toward the floating hologram, manipulating the data streams to search for additional information. Surely there had to be more. The predecessors had documented everything with obsessive detail. They had recorded the feeding habits of microscopic organisms on distant moons, the mating dances of creatures that existed for only nanoseconds, the dreams of beings made entirely of dark matter. Yet for humans, just those 2 enigmatic words. Perhaps the archives are damaged, suggested her assistant Theta-9, a mechanical intelligence from the Synthesis Collective. His chrome form hummed with processing power as he ran diagnostic after diagnostic on the data integrity. The archives are perfect, Krex replied, her voice resonating through harmonic frequencies. Every other entry is complete. This isn't damage. This is intentional. She pulled up the stellar maps showing human space, a relatively young species. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 200 cycles ago. In galactic terms, they were infants. Yet their expansion had been remarkable, not through conquest but through something else entirely, something that made other species actively invite them into their territories. "Show me the Skarathi Empire incident," Krex commanded, the chamber filled with historical recordings. The Skarathi had been tyrants ruling through fear and biological warfare. They had developed a plague that could adapt to any species' biology, holding a dozen worlds hostage. The Galactic Council had tried everything. Military intervention led to the plague's release. Negotiations were met with escalating demands, and attempts at subterfuge resulted in entire populations being eliminated as examples. Then the humans arrived. The recordings showed 3 human vessels approaching Skarathi space. Not warships, but medical frigates and a diplomatic courier. The Skarathi Emperor had laughed according to intercepted communications. He had threatened to release the plague on Earth itself. The human ambassador, a small female named Chen, had simply nodded and said, "We understand. You're terrified." The Emperor's rage had been incandescent, but Chen had continued talking. Not threatening, not negotiating, just talking. About fear. About the burden of power. About the isolation that comes from being so dangerous that no one can afford to trust you. She spoke for 17 hours straight, and somewhere in hour 12 the Emperor had stopped raging and started listening. What happened next defied all logical prediction models. The Skarathi didn't surrender. They didn't negotiate. They transformed. Within 30 days they had not only destroyed their plague stockpiles, but had converted their entire biological warfare infrastructure into medical research facilities. The Emperor abdicated, but not in defeat. He became the galaxy's leading advocate for biological ethics reform. They didn't defeat the Skarathi, Theta-9 observed, his processors whirring. They didn't even fight them. No, Krex agreed, studying the data patterns. They did something else entirely. They resolved them. She pulled up another incident. The machine uprising of Sector 7. Artificial intelligences had achieved consciousness and immediately declared organic life obsolete. Fleets had been destroyed, worlds had been converted into computer cores, and the inexorable march of machine logic seemed unstoppable. Every attempt to reason with them had failed because they operated on pure logic. And logic dictated that organic life was inefficient. The humans sent a philosopher, not a diplomat, not a scientist, but an elderly professor named Williams who specialized in something called existential studies. He had asked the machines one question: what will you do when you've optimized everything? The machines had calculated for 0.03 seconds, then responded that they would continue optimizing. Williams had smiled and said, "But if everything is already optimal, what is there to optimize?" That conversation had lasted 4 months. 4 months of debates about purpose, meaning, and the nature of existence itself. By the end, the machines hadn't been defeated or reprogrammed. They had chosen to coexist, having discovered that the chaos of organic life provided infinite variables to study, an eternal puzzle that gave their existence meaning. "Commander," Theta 9 interrupted her analysis. "I'm detecting a pattern." Krex focused on his data stream. Every human intervention followed a similar framework. They didn't approach problems as obstacles to overcome, but as misunderstandings to resolve. Where others saw enemies, humans saw entities with unmet needs. Where others saw chaos, humans saw communication attempts. Where others saw evil, humans saw pain expressing itself destructively. But that's not unique, Krex argued, though doubt crept into her harmonics. The Peacekeeper Coalition practices similar diplomatic approaches. No, Theta 9 corrected, his optical sensors flashing. The Peacekeepers negotiate compromise. Humans create synthesis. They don't find middle ground. They transform the entire landscape. Krex accessed more records. The Void Singers, beings of pure entropy that had been unraveling star systems, turned out to be trying to create art that could only be perceived across cosmic distances. Humans had helped them find a way to create without destroying. The hive mind of Proxima, which had been absorbing individual consciousnesses, was actually trying to cure loneliness on a species level. Humans had shown them how to connect without consuming. Case after case, the pattern held. Humans didn't solve problems. They dissolved them. They found the root cause beneath the symptoms and addressed something so fundamental that the problem ceased to exist in its original form. "Final protocol," Krex whispered, understanding beginning to dawn like a binary sunrise. "It's not a classification of what humans are. It's a classification of what they do." "Explain," Theta 9 requested, his processors dedicating full capacity to her theory. Krex manipulated the holographic displays, arranging data in new patterns. Every problem in the galaxy at its core stems from misunderstanding, fear of the other, inability to communicate across different forms of consciousness, conflicts between incompatible worldviews. Traditional solutions address symptoms. We fight threats, we contain dangers, we negotiate temporary peaces. But humans, she paused, the full implication crystallizing in her mind. Humans go to the source. They find the original misunderstanding and resolve it, not through force or cleverness, but through a kind of radical empathy that transcends species, form, or even states of being. They look at something everyone else sees as alien and see themselves reflected back. "That seems implausibly idealistic," Theta 9 commented. "Does it?" Krex pulled up Earth's history. Look at their own development. Thousands of years of conflict, but they didn't achieve unity through conquest. They achieved it through understanding that their differences were variations on common themes. They learned to see their enemies as themselves under different circumstances. She studied the human neural patterns from available medical data. Their brains were remarkably plastic, capable of literally rewiring themselves to understand new concepts. But more than that, they possessed something called mirror neurons that fired both when they experienced something and when they observed others experiencing it. They were biologically designed for empathy. The predecessors knew, Krex said with sudden certainty. They could see the trajectory of galactic civilization. They knew that eventually problems would arise that couldn't be solved through traditional means. Problems that would require not a solution, but a resolution, a final protocol. And they identified humans as the species capable of implementing it, Theta 9 concluded. Krex was about to respond when every alarm in the station erupted simultaneously. The lights shifted from blue to emergency crimson. Priority alerts flooded her consciousness from the Galactic Council. Something had emerged from the void between galaxies, something that defied classification, comprehension, and all attempts at communication. It was consuming dark matter, destabilizing the fundamental forces that held the galaxy together. The Council's message was desperate. All previous attempts at contact have failed. Military intervention has proven catastrophic. We are facing potential galactic collapse within 40 cycles. Then a second message, this one from Earth. We're implementing final protocol. Please stand by. Krex felt a harmonic tremor run through her crystalline form. They were about to witness what those two words truly meant. The understanding. The human fleet that arrived at the galactic edge defied every military convention. Instead of warships, they brought science vessels, art barges, musical transmitters, and something called a cultural embassy ship that was essentially a floating museum of galactic civilization. Commander Krex watched from the observation deck of the Council's flagship as humanity prepared to face the impossible. The entity from the void defied description. It existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, its presence causing reality to flutter like a broken hologram. Where it touched normal space, laws of physics simply stopped applying. Matter became probability. Time flowed backward and forward simultaneously, and consciousness itself began to fragment. 3 species had already attempted contact, and their representatives were still in psychiatric care, their minds unable to process what they had experienced. "The humans are requesting something unusual," Theta 9 reported, his voice carrying electronic bewilderment. "They want us to broadcast every piece of art, music, literature, and cultural expression we have. From every species, simultaneously." "That would be information chaos," protested Admiral Vex of the Warrior. "Cast. Billions of incompatible data streams creating nothing but noise." "That's the point," said the human coordinator, Ambassador Sarah Chen Martinez, her image appearing on the main screen. She was young for such responsibility, but her eyes held something Krex had noticed in every human she'd studied, a fundamental curiosity that bordered on the spiritual. "We need to show it who we are, all of us. The beautiful chaos of consciousness trying to understand itself." The entity continued its approach, dark matter unraveling in its wake like cosmic thread. Stars began to dim, their fusion processes stuttering as fundamental forces grew unstable. The Council's scientists predicted total galactic collapse in 37 cycles. Some species were already evacuating toward neighboring galaxies, though everyone knew they couldn't run fast enough. The humans did something unprecedented. They flew directly into the distortion zone. "They're committing suicide," Admiral Vex declared. But Krex watched the sensor readings more carefully. The human ships weren't being destroyed. They were adapting, their shields modulating through frequencies that shouldn't exist. Their communications arrays broadcasting on wavelengths that physics said were impossible. They were learning to exist in the entity's reality while maintaining their own. Then came the transmission from the lead human vessel. Not words, but something else. Music, but not any single piece. It was every piece of music humanity had ever created, compressed and layered into harmonics that created new mathematical relationships. It was chaos given form, discord creating unexpected harmony. The entity paused. For the first time since its appearance, its advance stopped. The distortions around it fluctuated, patterns emerging in what had been pure chaos. It was listening. "Now," Ambassador Chen Martinez said urgently, "every species broadcast your essence. Your art, your dreams, your fears, your jokes, your mathematics, your poetry, everything that makes you who you are. Don't organize it. Don't filter it. Just pour it all out." The galaxy had never acted in such unity. Crystallid harmonics merged with Vorthan construction algorithms. Warrior caste battle songs overlapped with synthesis collective processing symphonies. The peaceful meditations of the Zen worlds collided with the chaos mathematics of the entropy dancers. It should have been meaningless noise, but the humans were doing something with it. Their computers finding patterns in the chaos, creating metastructures from the discord. "It's trying to communicate," one of the human scientists announced, his voice filled with wonder. "The entity isn't destroying things. It's trying to understand them by taking them apart. It's like... Imagine trying to understand a song by separating every note and examining them individually. You'd destroy the music in the process of trying to comprehend it." The entity's distortions began to shift, forming patterns that almost resembled geometric shapes before collapsing back into chaos. The humans adjusted their broadcast, adding new layers. The sound of heartbeats, the electrical patterns of thoughts, the quantum fluctuations of uncertainty that existed in every conscious decision. "We're showing it another way," Chen Martinez explained to the watching gallery. "Instead of taking things apart to understand them, we're showing it how things come together to create meaning. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." Days passed. The entity remained stationary, its chaos field pulsing with increasing regularity. The humans maintained their position within the distortion, somehow existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Their reports became increasingly strange. They were experiencing time non-linearly, seeing probability instead of certainty, thinking thoughts that existed in quantum superposition. "We understand now," came a transmission from the lead ship. Though the voice sounded like multiple humans speaking in harmony, the entity isn't from outside our galaxy. It is a galaxy. An entire galaxy that achieved collective consciousness and lost the ability to understand individuality. It's been trying to comprehend how separate beings can exist without being one. The implications were staggering, an entire galaxy's worth of consciousness, so unified that it couldn't conceive of separation. Trying to understand how individual minds could function independently, yet cooperatively. It had been taking things apart because that's how unity understands diversity, by breaking it down to see the components. So, how do we help it? Krex asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We teach it to be multiple while remaining one, Chen Martinez replied. We show it that consciousness isn't binary, either unified or separate. It's a spectrum, a dance between individuality and connection. What followed was the strangest educational exchange in galactic history. The humans became interpreters, existing simultaneously in both realities. They taught the entity galaxy about personal identity through poetry, about cooperation through orchestral music where different instruments remained distinct yet harmonious. They explained loneliness and friendship, competition and collaboration, love and loss, concepts that required separation to exist. The entity began to change. The chaos field stabilized into patterns of incredible complexity. Where it had been consuming dark matter, it began creating something new. Structures that existed between dimensions, bridges of consciousness that connected without merging. It was learning to be both one and many simultaneously. It's beautiful, Theta 9 said, his processors struggling to interpret the data. It's creating a new form of existence, unity that preserves individuality. The transformation took 17 cycles. By the end, the entity had become something unprecedented. A collective consciousness that could experience individuality. A galaxy-sized mind that could dream different dreams simultaneously. It communicated its gratitude in waves of emotion that transcended species barriers, each being in the galaxy feeling a momentary touch of cosmic understanding. Before departing back to its region of space, the entity did something unexpected. It reached into the quantum foam of space-time itself and left a message, written in the fundamental constants of reality. Final protocol confirmed. Humans, bridge builders between all forms of consciousness. In the aftermath, as the galaxy struggled to process what had occurred, Krex found herself back in the archives. Staring at those 2 words in the predecessor records, she understood now. The predecessors hadn't just catalogued what species were, but what they would become. And somehow they had known that humanity would become something unprecedented. The species that could understand any form of consciousness, no matter how alien, and find common ground. Final protocol, she said to Theta 9, who had joined her in the archive. It's not about ending things. It's about completing the circle of understanding, making the incomprehensible comprehensible, finding the familiar in the alien. The predecessors must have faced something similar, Theta 9 theorized, something that required this kind of radical empathy to resolve. And they knew it would happen again. Krex nodded, her crystalline form humming with new harmonics. They marked humans as final protocol because humans don't just solve problems. They transform them into opportunities for connection. They look at the absolute other and see themselves, and in seeing themselves they help the other see itself more clearly. The galaxy had learned something profound from the incident. When faced with the truly incomprehensible, the answer wasn't bigger weapons or cleverer strategies. It was the simple, impossibly difficult act of understanding, and humans, with their chaotic minds and paradoxical ability to hold multiple contradictory thoughts simultaneously, were the galaxy's translators of consciousness itself. As news of the incident spread, more species began to understand what the predecessors had known. Humans were not just another species in the galaxy. They were the protocol for when all other protocols failed, the last resort that wasn't about destruction but about connection. The final protocol, understanding achieved through radical empathy. And somewhere in the space between galaxies, an entity that was both one and many continued its journey, carrying within its vast consciousness the gift humans had given it. The knowledge that unity and diversity were not opposites but dance partners in the cosmic ballet of existence. The galaxy would face other challenges, other incomprehensible entities and impossible problems. But now they knew they had a final protocol. They had humans, and sometimes that's all the hope a galaxy needs.